welcome to Self-Storage Made Simple. I am your host, Thaddeus Campbell, as always here today. Honored to have an absolute G, a young guy that I've been lucky enough to work with. I got to meet him about 6-8 months ago in the self-storage space. Works for a tech company, absolute baller in the real estate space. And beyond what he's going to talk to us about as far as the tech that he brings to the table, his journey in real estate is incredibly impressive. Just an impressive dude. So incredibly honored to welcome to the show, Kevin Santos. Kevin, thanks so much for coming and joining me for a half hour.
Thanks for having me, Thad. I appreciate it.
If everyone knew what you were going through in your personal life, and this is sort of like the real estate investor 101, Kevin's sitting in his room. Can you just turn your camera around and show everyone kind of the water dripping off the ceiling in his
My little office here. Yeah,
that
so
puppy is not there for decoration, right?
nope. And I got another one on the floor, some towels. So about 8 minutes before we were supposed to have our call, I had some guys working on the house today. I'm working on a live-in flip as we speak. I bought a hoarder house, and the water company had came and turned back on the water. Make a long story short, one of the lines was cut, and we didn't know. Luckily, there was a valve, but for a good 20 seconds, there was some pounding water, and it started coming through my ceiling onto the laptop, keyboard, iPad, all the good stuff. Luckily, everything's okay, but 'tis the life of a small-time real estate investor, I guess.
That's the part they show you in the flipping shows like 15 minutes in. Before they get to the fun
Oh yeah,
part, they show you the profit, they show you the little bit of pain.
yeah.
You're living through the pain part of it right now.
Yeah, and 45 minutes from now would be, the quintessential reveal, but I'm a ways away from that. It's a little bit more than 45 minutes. So we
So
got a
listen,
few weeks at
we're gonna
least.
we'll come back around to you dropping into that the live-in flip, which is kind of cool, and I want to get there. But I always start this by going back to you're still a young guy, but how do people get into real estate? What led you to this place? I'm going to let everyone know I connected with you through CoStar, an awesome real estate site for commercial real estate, and we'll get into CoStar a little bit as we go through the half hour. But I want to go back to Kevin Santos. How is it that you're now involved so intimately in real estate, both as far as your main job with CoStar and then obviously doing a bunch of real estate investing for yourself on the side?
For sure. So I would think like a lot of people, I did not have a very linear path. So I didn't go to college for real estate or anything like that. I was a criminal justice major, didn't do anything with that. I ended up being in business school. I was studying for an MBA and working full time for a travel company. So a lot of different verticals and areas that I was, I had my hand in different cookie jars, let's say. And I started saving up some money. I was still home with my parents, and I figured, hey, I should go rent an apartment and do what adults do and move on. And that quickly became I should buy a multi unit house. I should live in a multi unit house, live for free, and do all these things after I discovered a website called Bigger Pockets, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know. So I went down the Bigger Pockets rabbit hole for about 7 months before I touched anything. Literally hours of podcasts a day, reading what I could, absorbing everything I can, and my path led me to house hacking, and I've been doing that as well as now some flips and outside rentals the first few years of my journey here. I've been involved like I think 6 or 7 years, but 2 of those years I really took a break and didn't do much. But that's my early on story.
All right, we're going to get into a bunch of different aspects of this because you talked about for working for a travel company, and I want to go
Mhm.
down that road a little bit because I'm going to get some Kevin Santos suggestions for travel destinations. This is something you and I have talked about. You're sitting in a gaming chair. Now, I'm 50 years old. I'm going to date myself. I'm a Gen Xer, right? And so I think you're probably millennial, maybe kind of borderline.
Mhm.
You probably don't want to associate yourself with Gen Z. Everyone seems to not want to be associated. Even the Gen Zers don't want to be associated with Gen Z. But we, in my generation, we kind of have a bias. I see someone in a racing chair. Like we always do this, and my parents did the same thing with my generation. You guys are lazy. You don't work hard. You just brought up literally the idea of watching hours of podcasts at a time and 7 months that you invested in your education. How important was it for you to just dig in and really learn before jumping into this idea of house hacking and becoming a real estate investor?
So for most people, right, buying a house, if they only buy one, is going to be the most significant investment of their life. I have always been money minded. I've not always made the best money decisions, but I've always looked at things maybe differently than the average person. and I monetize everything in my head. And this was brought up to me. Actually, other people saw this before I ever did. And I remember even being on a cruise one time and I met a friend on there. He was a violinist. And we were talking about something, and he's like, "Man, you're the most money-minded person I've ever come across." He's like, "You look at everything with dollar signs." And I, at that point, didn't think of it, and I started thinking about what he had said, and kind of realized it was that way. But the learning piece for me is critical, right? So if I'm going to make a decision like that, some people talk about analysis paralysis and those kinds of things, and doing that for too long. And I would say that I had just the right amount of time. For me, those hours of learning on the day to day, which I was able to do because my last job was also outside sales. So I work for this travel company. I'm driving anywhere from an hour. If it's a light day, I might be on the road as much as 4 hours in between appointments some days. So I would literally get in the car, plug in my phone, throw another podcast on about house hacking, about people in New Jersey, people in Philly, locals that are doing it here, and how they made it work in this market. And this was 2017. I bought my first place. Actually, 2016, sold it in 2017, and then I bought my first duplex in 2018. But I spent, when I tell you, no exaggeration, at least an hour or two every day for the better part of 6 to 7 months learning before I ever tried to pull the trigger on something. That is what I did. And I'm not a guy that's done a tremendous amount of deals. I'm very selective in what I do, but all of them, the few that I have done, have been very successful. So I am happy about that.
I think it's so important to talk about. This is obviously a podcast that concentrates on self storage, and we'll get into self storage, especially CoStar. We use so extensively in my previous job, and still use whenever I can get access to it for self storage. But I think your background in real estate is so helpful, and it was I knew this in the first couple of times that we got together, and you were helping me understand CoStar. You understand real estate investing on a higher level, and
Mhm.
it made it easy for us to really kind of get to the core. When I needed something, you really understood why I needed it and where I needed it. It certainly makes sense. I think this is a theme that as I interview people on the podcast, and I always want to bring this out, this shit's not easy. It's not like
No.
Kevin Santos just bought a scratch off ticket at
Yeah.
Wawa and all of a sudden lucked himself into being in a really nice spot where you have some investment properties and a really good job with a growing tech company. And this didn't happen on accident.
No, and I think the issue I had right before I logged into the call is the quintessential example of like what can happen and what can go wrong will go wrong lots of times. So literally, it was raining on my computer 8 minutes before I talked to you, and I'm not somebody that necessarily needs to live in a live-in flip. I've done a couple investments, but it's something I choose to do. I enjoy it. I like a challenge. Some days are better than others, but having that understanding of and most of my experience is single family, multifamily properties, but learned a lot in commercial the last year and a half or so. It does help, and it all translates to almost the same thing, right? Anybody that's doing this, they're chasing the almighty dollar. It's how they do it, and the numbers that they use, or the terminology that they use, might change a little bit. The asset class that they like, the locations that they like, all that varies, but the end game is the same for all the people that I come across. So for me, transitioning and going full time into real estate a couple years ago. So originally I had my real estate license. I did some residential stuff. I still have that. But CoStar came knocking, and it was an awesome opportunity. They're a publicly traded Fortune 500 company. They're huge. So right now, the big push for them too is Homes.com, and I just want to mention that because like I've been doing a lot more residential. They've made us all pseudo Homes.com reps. So it's been a whirlwind being here the last year and a half, and it's not something I see myself leaving anytime soon. I love real estate, and I have my hand in a bunch of different avenues within it, I'd say.
We're going to get back to CoStar. And by the way, you mentioned homes.com, and it's learn neuro not neurolinguistic programming. There's a three-letter acronym for the part of our brain that starts seeing things once you hear about it. I had
Hmm.
never heard of homes.com until you and I had lunch like a month and a, or breakfast a month and a half ago. I see homes.com everywhere now. I just saw an advertisement for it somewhere. There's a car that's decked out in homes.com that is on one of the routes I travel frequently, parked in
I
the
see.
parking lot. I see it all the time. So thank you for making me recognize homes.com everywhere I go now. I want to dial back. Well, I'm going to go backwards before we go forwards to dive deeper into CoStar, because I think CoStar has some functionalities that a lot of people that are tuning into our podcast might really enjoy. I think there's a lot of people that watch our podcast, quite frankly, who are probably already use CoStar. But for those of them who don't, I want to kind of have you give us an example of how it can really help get granular in the search for what most of us are searching for, which is a lot of people looking for value add self-storage facilities, smaller mom and pop facilities that they can go and buy and add some value to and maybe turn a profit. Or like if you're like me looking for raw land. So I want to get into that, but I promised I want to talk to Kevin Santos, the former travel professional. You spent years of your life literally carting around the world, guiding tours and some pretty amazing places. So what I would like you to do is give me 5 destinations around the world, whether in the United States or other countries, that are the Kevin Santos you must go visit this place list.
So my top five, and yeah, I didn't guide the tours per se. I was a sales guy. My job was to get people on them, but I knew plenty of tour guides. When I got to travel with them, I had the same experience that anybody else would have if they purchased and traveled on one of these. Easily the top two that always come to mind: Egypt. I went there twice. And if you're into exotics and stories and history and things like that, there is no better place. You think it's just the pyramids, it goes far beyond that. I love Alaska. I'm very much like a nature person. I could do nothing and be out in national parks and be totally happy. So Alaska, as far as beauty, serene wilderness, that was the place for me. And then the next couple are a little harder. I have to throw Italy in there. Italy, I've done 3 times, all the things that you would expect: Rome, Florence, Venice. But it's really like the secondary places that are quite a bit nicer, in my opinion, that I think a lot of people might miss. The smaller towns, the less touristy stuff. I also did Singapore. So I have an uncle that lives out there randomly. It's a long story. We're not Singaporean or anything, but he works for a big bank and he moved out that way. So that was another major experience. It was very different than anything I had done. So I think that's 4 of 5. And then I would have to say another top tier favorite for me, and this is not so much as related to the job that I had, was Portugal. My family's Portuguese, and it almost sounds biased, but I actually hated it growing up. So it's a funny story. We had a house in the middle of nowhere, kind of like farmland, and it was just me. I don't speak Portuguese well, and there was like 7 little old ladies and one cafe, and I'd just be there, kind of hanging out with cornfields and chickens for the summertime. But it wasn't until high school that my parents took me to the south of Portugal, which is called the Algarve region, or Algarve, and that place is second to none in terms of beaches. And I also love the city of Porto, which is in the north. And that's a place now that I've grown to appreciate a lot more, and I can have the wine, so that helps too.
Increases the experience a little bit. That's
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, I got 4 left to visit. I have been to Italy. I've been to actually the other parts of Italy. My wife her family's from there, so I've been lucky enough to visit the Adriatic coast, which is the east coast, which
Oh
is the
yeah.
less populated side of it, until you get all the way up to Venice, which we didn't go to. But anyway, I got 4 others to go to, and you are not the first person that I've ever heard. Either A, you're not the first person I know in my circle that has an uncle in Singapore, oddly enough, but then I have another close friend who is espousing the virtues of a trek to Egypt. So I'm gonna have to get that on the list for sure.
Yeah.
All
Egypt's a
right,
good one.
let's come back to what Kevin Santos does for his day job. So
Sure.
appreciate you sharing so in depth with the real estate journey. And I could spend another half hour, quite frankly, just talking about the duplex and the house hack. But this is not really what this podcast is about. There's plenty of them out there for people looking to go that route. I want to talk about CoStar and the functionality of CoStar. I was blown away by the amount of information and the amount. Listen, the hardest thing to do is to go out and gather real data in real estate, right? And when I was in residential real estate, we were all buying the same list. We were all getting the same phone numbers for the same homeowners, and we were all calling them, and it was all the same information, and we were all getting the wrong number the same amount of time. CoStar has taken this to another level. So I want you to talk to me a little bit. We'll dive in, and hopefully you can share your screen and
Mhm.
show us a little bit of the functionality of what CoStar does. But Talk to me a little bit just about the mass of data gathering and the process that CoStar goes through to make sure that for especially in commercial real estate where you have LLCs in the way, people are literally trying to hide their identity to divorce themselves from the property. We're trying to get to the owner. We want to get a real name with a real phone number. I don't want to call an office and get a secretary. I want to get to a decision maker.
Mhm.
Tell me about the process CoStar has in place to go out and gather that kind of information.
So I'll try to give you a 30-second version of everything that we do. And what really differentiates us. So CoStar has three main ways of data collection, and one of them really is the piece that separates us from anybody else. So the first thing is that we have a bunch of brands, right? So the CoStar group itself is one thing, that's the umbrella entity. All the other brands that fall within it, such as CoStar and LoopNet and Apartments.com and Homes.com and so on and so forth, are part of what draws in the data into the actual CoStar platform. So a lot of that's voluntary, right? I mean, we're pulling up stuff from the MLS now with homes.com, but somebody that lists on LoopNet, it's an agent that has a listing. They give us whatever it is. It's information that's given to us. We collect it. We know what things sell for. We know what things are leasing for when they list it on apartments.com. That's one piece. We have a lot of third-party vendors that provide us financial information, traffic information, contact information, which we then supplement. But the real big thing that we do is we have about 1,600 researchers, and it's just kind of boots on the ground data collection, like the car that you saw that did homes.com stuff. We have that for CoStar. We have that for apartments.com. They're going out, they're collecting data in the field, but we also have an in-house team that sits in Richmond, where like Philly ourselves, we have 25 people that just focus on this area, and they're making calls and they're talking to anybody that's involved in commercial real estate and especially transactions. So when it comes to lease comps, sale comps, what's going on in an area, so on and so forth, we want to know about every major commercial real estate transaction that happens. And beyond that, we go in and we want to provide as much value as we can to our end users and subscribers, right? So it doesn't help so much if I tell you some S Corp or this LLC owns this entity and you can't figure out who it is. So, and no data system is perfect. Any company that tells you that's probably not being very honest with you. But 8 to 9 times out of 10, I'm getting my clients what they want, or at least close enough where they can do a lot more than what they were doing, whatever their previous solution was.
Yeah, I think anyone who's been in real estate for any amount of time, anyone more than a week past that initial 3 day seminar they paid for, knows that the reality of data is that you're going to make a whole lot of phone calls that
Yes.
get you nowhere. But the bright side of that is, especially in commercial real estate, where we're dealing with projects that could be 10, 12, $15 million, 25, 30, $40 million sales on the back end. You don't need to hit a lot to get to make some money and to be successful. You just need to hit every once in a while. And so the big part of it is, and why I thought it was important to illuminate how much work CoStar is putting into it, is the last thing you want to do is waste time. If you
Mm-hmm.
have to spend the time, you spend the time, right? But if you can find a way to condense time and to get better results, of course we'd all rather be spending our time doing something other than trying to get a hold of someone. So appreciate that. I mean, 1,600 people is a whole lot of people collecting data. Are you able to share your screen and kind of dig us into CoStar? There's something that you showed me 6 months ago that still kind of blows my mind. That was incredibly time saving for me, and I'd like to share, even though I really don't want to share it with people because I don't want other people to know that they can do this. The reality is that I can go into CoStar and I can scrape every off market self storage facility in the country, and I can kind of filter it however I want. If I don't want to buy a facility, I don't want to call somebody that has a 10,000 square foot facility, I can really get direct owner information for a lot of these facilities and be able to really gather some information to be able to make contact with people.
Absolutely. I'm happy to share and run you through 1% of 1% of 1% of what CoStar has.
100%. And
Uh,
what we'll do at the end of that is we're going to make sure that everyone watching knows exactly how to get a hold of Kevin, because this really is going to be a 30,000 foot view of something that gets very, very granular.
Absolutely. Can you see my screen? First time using the system with you, so I just want to make
Absolutely.
sure. Awesome.
Yep.
So if you were a client, and let me just check my battery right here. I know we're running a little light, and I should be okay. So if you log into CoStar as a client, you're essentially going to see the same thing that I'm looking at right now. So this first page, and I didn't even say too much about it, but CoStar, if you're not familiar, I know we've talked about it a little bit, is a commercial real estate data and analytics powerhouse. It's really the only thing of its kind that exists in the industry. There's other companies that maybe have bits and pieces of what we have, but not collectively what CoStar has. And I couldn't begin to show you that in even an hour's time, let alone a few minutes. But an example of what I showed you, we went into the all properties tab here. I sit in the Philly office, so it auto defaults to here. Any clients that sign up, it auto defaults to the areas that they're in. But if I'm looking at this, the first thing I kind of want to mention is that, like, if I am looking at the MLS, so around this area, we have Bright MLS. Bright MLS is the second largest in the entire country. But a lot of commercial brokers and just landlords in general and owners don't list properties on the MLS. I ran a search the other day, for example, for sale properties in Gloucester, Camden, and Burlington counties. The MLS only had 25% of what's currently listed in CoStar. And that doesn't touch the off market stuff. So all the gray that we're looking at is off market properties that CoStar has information on, all kinds of data, analytics, financials, who owns it, when the last time it was listed, when it sold, how it compares to other properties in the area in terms of price per square foot, so on and so forth. Most of the data that anybody would want on these particular properties. The blue diamonds are simply what's for sale or for lease. So I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, I ran like a basic self-storage search with you, right?
We did a New Jersey storage that was not blue, right? We were able to
Hmm.
eliminate, and I think we did like 30,000 to 100,000 square foot facilities. I think we got a little bit granular with what we were doing, as far as, because we didn't want to mess around with something that was less than 30,000 square feet. And you were able to really just give me everything that was available that, was off market. I say available. Everything that was not for sale was off market facility, but I could then get contact information and go after an owner and see if they had any interest in selling. And I'm not fighting against everyone else, to buy things that were already listed on market.
Got it. So while you were chatting there, I kind of just ran something similar. So I didn't do all of New Jersey just for speed purposes. But all I really had to do was, I think that was 2 or 3 clicks. But all I really had to do, we have all these different types of filters, right? So we have the main ones up top. You were talking about 30,000 square feet and all these different asset classes that CoStar tracks. Soon, for those that are interested in residential data, we'll have some of that too. But I can come in here. I don't even really necessarily need to do like an industrial piece because you're looking for something specific. So I went into our secondary filters here and I just put in self storage. So all it's showing me at the moment is self storage facilities that exist in Camden County. If you're going to buy one that's currently built, you're buying one of these 47. However, that blue diamond tells me that only one of them is currently for sale or for lease. So you got 46 others that you could choose from, and then you're doing what you talked about, which is hitting the phones, reaching out to these owners, whether it's going to be these different townships, Berlin, Lindenwald, Voorhees, doesn't really matter. If you want to buy something in Camden County, it's one of these properties. So what we did, and just to get a better sample size here, I'll click out of Camden County and the system quickly shows me all the self-storage facilities that are tagged in this area. I can see a couple more up here that are for sale or for lease. If I'm running a search in CoStar, currently I could still remove those. So I can just come in, select what's for sale, take them out, select what's for lease, take them out. And then I have an off-market search in essence, right? So that's part of what we did. To save time, I won't go through all the clicks. But if I'm going in here, what separates CoStar and part of our research team's job is to come and get this information. So I can go into each property card, and I'll do that for a second. Let's pick a nice looking one. This one in Cinnaminson. I think I actually almost bought a house down the street from this one. But looking at this, and forgive my Wi-Fi at the moment. I don't know if that got wet too. But if I come into this, it shows me here this little home row. And that's kind of how CoStar works across the board. All these different tabs are really different data centers themselves. Like you could spend hours and hours in any one of these pulling all kinds of useful stuff, but each property has its own card and it gives me the last sale price. It gives me any lease information we have. We can run lease analysis models on all these different buildings. Any sale information from its past sales that we have, the tenants that are currently in it. loan information if we have it, financials on the property, changes, people moving in and out, it expanding, it shrinking, whatever. Demographics, public record, you get it. I don't have to explain each one of these. So I can click through this property tab, or I can just look at the summary page, get a rough idea if it's something that I want. And a lot of times the owners are listed right here. Now, this is a bigger company out of Singapore, ironically. So I got to call my uncle. But if I come back, CoStar has different ways to visualize things. So what I showed you a few months ago is something similar to what I'm going to show now. So we come into the list view, and this is something you would use if you want to be a little bit faster about reaching out to some of these people that are the owners. So I can come into the owners tab, and once it loads 226 properties, and it may just be my internet. Refresh, see if it
You
gets, there
never
we go.
go too smooth.
Of course, the second I refresh it, it popped up.
That's all right. We can wait. You're giving us some awesome. While this is loading, I wanted to
Yeah.
just go back to that. What I thought was amazing was having the loan information, right? We're going through
Mhm.
a serious, change in the dynamics of banking. And for those of you who have not been in the commercial space for very long, most commercial loans are on a 5-year balloon. So it might be a
Mhm.
25 or 30-year amortization as far as what your monthly payment is going to cost. But there'll be a balloon at 5 years where if you don't pay off the loan in 5 years, there's some significant penalties as far as your interest rate going long term. So usually every 5 years these loans get renegotiated. Man, there's been a massive increase, right? We were getting loans in the 3%, some people even less than 3% on big commercial loans. Now we're looking at sixes, sevens as people are coming up to this 5-year balloon payment. There could be some pain there, right? That might represent a buying opportunity for someone. And I can go in and I can see exactly when this person took their most recent loan. And I can plan who I'm going to call based on, hey, I know these people got 6 months to a year before they're going to have to refinance their loan. Let's find out if they maybe have a pain point there.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's so many different ways to utilize CoStar for prospecting, and it's all up to the user, right? So you just tell me what you want. 9 times out of 10, I can give you something that'll help get you there, whether it's through the loan information. People look for like lien information on properties, if they're vacant, if they're abandoned, all that stuff we have info on. And a lot of times people just want to call everybody that has a property that fits their buy box. So in this particular search, all we did is look at the self-storage facilities in that, we'll call it greater Philly area. CoStar always shows me how many properties match what I'm looking at. So we have 226 properties split amongst 71 owners, which simply means that a bunch of these companies or individuals or government or whatever own more than one. So I can see that in this list view. This is more of an aggregate of everything that we're looking at versus looking at it on a property level. So if I'm looking at the list view, I can see Public Storage, huge company, owns 30 in this region. If I really care, I can go see the portfolio of that particular company or owner for thousands of owners that are in CoStar. So any one of these, I can sort by which way I want. If I want to reach out to public companies, you'll see some individuals on here, individual companies. I can go through these 4 pages and figure out who the owners are, other contacts that work at those companies. I have phone numbers in here. I have the number of properties in that search. So this simply means the amount of storage facilities in that greater Philly area that we were just seeing on a map. I can hover back and do Camden County again if I really wanted to, or whatever other area I'm focused on. And then the other cool thing I love about CoStar is that it shows me the amount of properties that these particular owners have. So we're tying back their entire portfolios to these different companies, and we'll do it on individual levels too. And if I go into like page 3, we can see these people are a little bit smaller. And now I'm starting to see some names like Steven Rizzo or Jonathan Salinas, if I'm saying that correctly. And I can see where they're from, where they're living. I have their phone numbers. If I click in, same thing. I can see some portfolios. So our friend John here has only 2 properties. I can come in and click John and see a little bit about him out in Hoboken, so on and so forth. You get the idea, and the facilities that he owns. So we really make it a lot quicker to get to these people. And I want to call out one more thing. So we're not perfect. We're missing a phone number here, right? Jersey Homes. Not sure who that is, but say for whatever reason, this was the property that you wanted and you were a CoStar subscriber. So actually, it gives us the address that is there, but we don't have a contact for Jersey Homes. Our research team, those 1,600 people, act as an extension of our subscribers. So if somebody calls up and says, "Hey, I really need this person. We're interested in that property," our research team has an arsenal of tools at their disposal to get a hold of these people. All kinds of things you probably aren't even aware of that exist. We use and we track people down, and most of the time we can get at least a few of the people that are responsible if there is more than one under a particular entity. Does that make sense?
It's mind boggling, to be honest with you, and quite frankly, we're 29 minutes into this interview, and I try and honor everyone's time, not only you for coming and joining me, but the people watching. I know you can go for another hour because I've sat with you for another hour and really dug into this, but just the versatility and the amount. You said something so important, right? Everyone goes about things a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really like about CoStar is no matter whatever your desire is about how you're seeking to make contact with people to do business, this platform is going to give somebody the ability to do it the way they want to do it. And I think that's so powerful. Kevin, I hate to cut you off because we could talk, as I said, about 20 different things for another hour. We'll have to do this again sometime. Before I wrap up the podcast, I want you to let everyone know LinkedIn, Facebook, email. What's the best way for someone that's interested in more information for CoStar to get a hold of you?
The best way, if you're looking for CoStar or Homes.com stuff, if you happen to do some residential things, is most likely my email. I don't know if I want to put my personal cell phone number out there, but my email is ksantos@costar.com, KSANTOS at costar.com. That would be the quickest. And then if you connect with me at that point, usually I'm cool with giving out my phone number and being available for people. And this role, really anybody at CoStar that would end up helping a potential person. So if you're way out on the West Coast or something, I may have to pass you off to another rep. But we all work the same, which is a very consultative sales approach, right? The whole thing with CoStar is that there's so much I could show you. I could be here for weeks and still not show you the system. So we sit down, we ask a lot of questions, we try to understand what the end user is actually doing, and then showing you the best of what we have in that particular space. So even in you guys, I've talked to a couple different self-storage people, and they all do something a little bit different and look for slightly different data. And it will mean simply different clicks and different screens in CoStar for most people. But I appreciate you having me. I appreciate all the attempts and the
Can't
working with
thank
my
you enough,
little leak
man.
here.
I'm upset because I didn't even get to the story about your mastery of something that I believe in, which is networking. Just so you guys know, Kevin is living in a house that he owns because he dog sat for the person that he ended up buying it for. So I wanted to share that little anecdotal story. This guy is a master networker. To piggyback off of Kevin, I have all his contact and information. So if any of you want to get a hold of him and for whatever reason you didn't get it here, reach out to me. We'll have it in the description on YouTube and where the podcast lives. Don't be afraid to reach out to me though, and I can connect you to him if you have any trouble. As always, if you got anything of value out of this, hit the subscribe button to the Safe Storage USA YouTube page. Leave a comment. Tell us what you thought. Tell us if you thought Kevin was amazing because he was. Tell us if you thought he was a jerk because he doesn't care. Doesn't matter either way, but give us some interaction. I'm looking for new podcast guests. So if you guys have people you want to hear from, whether they're in the safe storage space or someone ancillary, let me know. As always, I'm looking for self-storage facilities. So if you have something you're looking to sell, whether it's a piece of raw land or an existing facility, reach out and let me know. Appreciate you all for watching, and we will see you again next week.
Thanks, Dad.